Have you ever felt like your life just fell apart? That the ground fell out from under you and everything you knew, your security, your certainties, even who you thought you were, was suddenly gone? Just imagine, you are 17 years old, a respected warrior, part of a powerful clan. And on a bloody morning in October 1600, in the Battle of Sekigahara, you lose everything. Your army is massacred, your clan is destroyed, your social position turns to dust, and you have to flee like a criminal, just to save your own skin. This was the darkest moment in the life of Miyamoto Musashi, the man who would become the greatest samurai in Japanese history. But here's the fascinating thing. That brutal fall wasn't the end of his story, it was the beginning. Because over the next few years, lost in the Japanese forests, living as a wandering ronin, Musashi developed 5 mental rules that not only saved his life, but created a code of conduct so powerful that even today, 400 years later, these rules can pull anyone out of the depths of despair. And look, I'm not talking about vague philosophy or cheap self-help. I'm talking about battlefield-tested principles forged in the deepest pain a human being can feel. The first rule? It goes against everything you've ever learned about coping with grief. The second rule will shock you with its brutal simplicity. And the fifth rule? Man, the fifth rule is so counterintuitive that most people refuse to accept that it works. But it works, and I'll prove it to you. Before I go on, do me a favor. How many people do you know who are stuck in a life they don't want to live? How many of your friends are pretending everything is fine when inside everything is falling apart? If you've made it this far, it's because something inside you recognizes this pain. And that's not weakness, it's courage. Because admitting that we need to change is the first step to getting out of the hole. So take a deep breath and come with me. Because what you're about to learn in the next few minutes could be the difference between staying stuck in the same cycle of suffering, or finally finding the strength to rebuild your life from scratch. And trust me, if it worked for a 17-year-old boy who lost everything in a medieval war, it can work for you too. Let's talk about October 1600. Musashi is on the Sekigahara plain, in the middle of the most important battle in Japanese history. On his side, 80,000 warriors. On the other side, another 80,000. In 6 hours of combat, everything changed. Musashi's army was destroyed. Tens of thousands of men were killed. Severed heads were scattered across the battlefield like rotten fruit. And Musashi, he managed to escape. But escaping was not a victory. It was a humiliation, because in the samurai code, dying in battle with honor is worth more than living like a coward. Now imagine, you are a teenager, you have lost everything, you are being hunted like a common criminal, and your entire identity has been destroyed in one morning. What would you do? Most people would do one of two things: either kill themselves to preserve their honor, or spend the rest of their lives regretting it, drinking it, hiding from the shame. Musashi did something different, something that would change not only his life, but the entire samurai philosophy. First rule: accept the hard reality. He stopped resisting what had happened. Look, this sounds simple, but it's not. Accepting reality when it's brutal is one of the hardest things there is, because our brain is programmed to reject pain. When something terrible happens, our first reaction is denial. This can't be happening to me. Then comes anger. This is unfair. Then comes bargaining. If I do this, maybe things will go back to normal. But Musashi skipped all those steps. He looked at the wreckage of his life and said, okay, this is what it is now. What now? Not why me, not this shouldn't have happened. Simply, what now? This shift in question is explosive, because when you stop fighting what has already happened, all the energy that was being wasted in resistance is freed up for action. Think of it this way: you're in a house on fire. You can either scream, "This house shouldn't be on fire," or you can run for the exit. Which of these actions will save your life? Acceptance is not passivity, it is strategy, and there's a study from Harvard University that proves this. Researchers followed people who had experienced severe trauma, job loss, divorce, death in the family, and discovered something fascinating. The people who recovered the fastest were not those who suffered the least. They were those who accepted the new reality the quickest, because acceptance frees you to ask the most important question. Given that this has already happened, what is my next move? Musashi asked this question, and the answer led him to the second rule. But before I continue, answer me one thing. What are you trying to deny in your life right now? What situation are you resisting that is only making you suffer more? Because until you accept where you are, you can't go to where you want to be. After accepting his new reality, Musashi faced the second great temptation, the desperate search for immediate relief. Just think. You are suffering, lost, without purpose. Every day is agony. The pain is so much that it feels like it will kill you inside. At this point, anything that promises to ease the pain seems tempting. Alcohol, food, sex, entertainment, drugs, anything that will make you forget, even if only for a few hours. In feudal Japan, ronin, masterless samurai, often became drunken wanderers, compulsive gamblers, or dishonorable mercenaries. It was the natural fate of those who had lost everything. But Musashi refused that path. Second rule, reject weakening pleasures. Instead of seeking comfort, he chose the harder path, extreme discipline. He began to live like a warrior monk. He slept outdoors, ate only what was necessary to survive, trained his sword 8 hours a day, meditated, studied, and wrote. Every day was a battle against the temptation of easy comfort. And here's what modern science has discovered about it. When you're in pain, seeking immediate pleasure doesn't solve the problem. It amplifies it. A neuroscientist at Stanford University has made a startling discovery. He compared the brains of people who dealt with trauma through self-care, i.e., pampering themselves, with those who dealt with it through discipline. The result? People who pampered themselves had even higher levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, after a while. Why? Because the brain realizes that you are running away from the problem, not solving it. And this generates even more anxiety. It's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. At the time, it feels like relief, but later, the fire gets worse. As for the people who chose the discipline, not only did they recover faster, they came out of the experience stronger than before. Musashi understood this intuitively. He knew that the suffering he chose to endure would be different from the suffering that had been imposed on him. One is random and destructive. The other is intentional and constructive. Think like this. If you are going to suffer, and you will because life is suffering, at least choose a suffering that strengthens you instead of one that destroys you. Training your discipline hurts at first, but every day you overcome temptation, you become stronger. Every no you say to what is easy is a yes to who you want to become. It's like building a muscle. It hurts, but it makes you stronger. Already seeking comfort when you should be building. That's like taking anesthetic before a necessary surgery. It may ease the pain, but it impedes healing. And there is a phrase that Musashi wrote years later that sums it all up. The path is daily discipline in small things. Little things, not big heroic gestures, little choices every day between what is easy and what is right. Wake up on time. Do what needs to be done. Say no to what weakens you. Sounds simple. Try it for a week and you'll see how difficult it is, but it is this difficulty that rebuilds you. Now tell me, what is your addiction? What is the thing you use to escape the pain but that deep down you know is hurting you? Because until you cut that out, you won't be able to develop the third rule. 1612, Ganryu Island. Musashi is about to face the most famous duel in Japanese history. Across the beach stands Sasaki Kojiro, known as the Demon of the Longsword, one of the greatest swordsmen who ever lived. Perfect technique, fast as lightning, and completely obsessed with killing Musashi. The crowd is waiting. The gamblers are nervous. Everyone knows that one of the two will die today. And here's a detail that changed everything. Musashi arrived 3 hours late on purpose. While Kojiro was on the beach warming up, nervous, thinking about the duel, working his mind, Musashi was carving a wooden sword. When he finally appeared, Kojiro exploded with rage. He shouted, swore, threatened. He was seething with hatred. Musashi, calm, controlled breathing, crystal clear mind. The duel lasted 30 seconds. Kojiro, technically superior, lost. He died with his skull crushed by Musashi's wooden sword. Why? Third rule, your emotions are your enemy. Kojiro fought with anger, Musashi fought with reason, and that is the difference between life and death. Look, this goes against everything that modern culture teaches. Nowadays, everyone says, follow your feelings, trust your heart, be authentic with your emotions. But Musashi discovered something that modern neuroscience has confirmed. Your emotions are terrible advisors. A Harvard University researcher followed 2,000 people for 10 years and found that 87% of the decisions they regretted most were made in intense emotional states. Anger, fear, sadness, euphoria. When you are overcome by any strong emotion, your judgment plummets. That's why you send that message on WhatsApp when you're angry and regret it later. That's why you spend money you don't have when you're sad. That's why you make stupid decisions when you're in love. Your emotions were made for emergencies. They are alarms, not GPS. When you're being attacked by a lion, feeling fear is useful. It makes you run. But when you're trying to rebuild your life, letting fear rule will only paralyze you. Musashi understood this. He developed a technique he called imperturbable mind. It doesn't mean he didn't feel emotions. It means he didn't let his emotions decide for him. Think of it this way. You are the pilot of an airplane. Your emotions are the passengers. They can scream, cry, panic, but you are the one in control. If you let the passengers fly the plane, everyone dies. And there's a simple technique that Musashi used, the 10-second rule. Every time he felt a strong emotion, he would count to 10 before acting. He would take a deep breath. He would let the emotional wave pass. Because emotions are like waves. They come, peak, and then subside. If you can ride the wave instead of being drowned by it, you maintain control. This works for anything. Anger, count to 10. Fear, count to 10. Sadness, count to 10. At this point, you ask yourself, what would the most rational version of me do right now? And then you act based on reason, not emotion. Does it feel cold? Does it feel robotic? Maybe, but it works. How many times have you screwed yourself over by acting on impulse? How many opportunities have you missed out on fear? How many relationships have you destroyed out of anger? If you want to rebuild your life, you need to learn to be the pilot, not the passenger. And here's the paradox. When you stop being a slave to your emotions, you become freer to feel them fully. Because you know you can feel without being controlled. You can be sad without making stupid decisions. You can be angry without destroying what you've built. You can be afraid without being paralyzed. Your emotions become information, not commands. Now tell me, what emotion dominates you the most? Anger, fear, sadness, anxiety? Because until you learn to control it, you will continue to be your own worst enemy. But there is something even more dangerous that can destroy all your efforts. After years of living as a wandering Ronin, Musashi faced an enemy more subtle than any sword, himself. The loneliness was overwhelming. The days dragged on the same, and slowly a dangerous obsession began to grow in his mind. He began to constantly review the Battle of Sekigahara. He replayed every moment, every decision, every mistake. He spent hours imagining how things could have been different. What if I had done this? What if I had chosen that? Why did this happen to me? This constant rumination was destroying him from the inside. It was like a wound that wouldn't heal because he wouldn't stop picking at it. And here's the deadly trap. When your life falls apart, it's natural to turn 100% of your focus inward, to your pain, your trauma, your story. You become obsessed with yourself. You relive the same toxic thoughts. You go around in circles in your own suffering. But Musashi realized something crucial. Rule 4. Stop being the center of the universe. Obsession with oneself is a prison, and he made a radical decision to expand his mind beyond his own pain. He began studying philosophy, art, poetry, and architecture. He learned calligraphy, painting, and sculpture. He traveled around Japan, got to know different cultures, and talked to masters from different fields. He literally forced his brain to be interested in things bigger than his personal suffering. And something extraordinary happened. The more he learned about the world, the less his pain seemed. Not because the pain lessened, but because he gained perspective. It's like climbing a mountain. Down below, a rock in the path seems like a giant obstacle. But from the top of the mountain, you see that it's just a small rock in an immense landscape. Modern neuroscience explains exactly why this works. A University of Michigan study found that people who focus exclusively on their problems activate the same brain areas associated with chronic depression. But when these same people are exposed to knowledge on completely different subjects, the brain forms new neural connections that literally turn off the suffering circuits. It's like you give your mind other options to focus on besides the pain. Musashi understood this intuitively. He knew that a small mind can only see small problems, but an expanded mind can see solutions that were previously invisible. And there's an exercise he did that's brilliant. Every day he dedicated at least 1 hour to learning something completely different from what he was feeling. If he was sad, he studied mathematics. If he was angry, he practiced calligraphy. If he was anxious, he observed nature. The goal was to train the mind to break out of the loop of suffering and connect with something greater. Because here's the brutal truth. Your suffering, however real, is just a microscopic fragment of the human experience. There are 8 billion people in the world. Billions of stories, millions of years of evolution, trillions of possible neural connections. And are you wasting all this immensity by getting stuck in a small narrative about your pain? I'm not saying your pain doesn't matter. I'm saying it's not the only thing that matters. When you expand your perspective, 2 things happen. First, you realize that your problems are not unique. Other people have been through similar things and overcome them. This gives you hope. Second, you discover mental resources you didn't even know you had, because your mind was too busy suffering to explore its own capabilities. It's like living in a mansion but spending your whole life locked in the basement. You have no idea what you're missing. Musashi turned this mental expansion into a competitive advantage, because while other warriors only studied fighting, he studied everything. This made him unpredictable, creative, able to find solutions that no one else saw. And the same thing can happen to you. When you stop ruminating on your problems and start feeding your mind with new knowledge, your ability to solve those problems increases exponentially. So answer me. When was the last time you learned something completely new? Something that had nothing to do with your current problems, because a stagnant mind generates stagnant solutions. But there is one last trap that could destroy all this progress. 1645. Musashi is now recognized as Japan's greatest swordsman. He won more than 60 duels, He never lost a fight. He wrote the Book of Five Rings, which is still studied today by businessmen, athletes, and military men. But in a letter to a disciple, he reveals something surprising. The most dangerous enemy I have ever faced did not wield a sword. He was invisible, silent, and nearly destroyed me completely. What enemy was that? Envy. Even after all his discipline, emotional control, and expanded perspective, Musashi discovered that there was still one deadly trap: comparing his pain to the apparent happiness of others. During his years as a wandering Ronin, he had seen other samurai who had not lost everything in the war, warriors who still had clans, positions, recognition, and it ate away at him from the inside. Why do they have everything and I have nothing? Why did suffering choose me? It's not fair. This constant comparison was like a slow poison. It destroyed any progress he made, because no matter how much you grow, there will always be someone who seems to be better than you. And that's when he discovered the final rule. Fifth rule: gratitude is a weapon, but not the fake gratitude of positive thinking. Strategic gratitude. Musashi began to train his mind to focus on what he had instead of what he had lost. He had life. He had health. He had the freedom to choose his own path. He had knowledge. He had experience. He had the opportunity to completely reinvent himself. And here's what science has discovered about it. A neuroscientist at the University of California conducted an experiment with 300 people who had experienced severe trauma. He divided the group into two. Group 1, 15 minutes a day thinking about what they had lost. Group 2, 15 minutes a day thinking about what they still had. After 30 days, the brains of the two groups were completely different. Group 1 showed increased activity in the amygdala, fear center, and decreased activity in the prefrontal cortex, reason center. Group 2 showed the opposite: less fear, more reasoning ability, and something impressive: higher levels of dopamine and serotonin, happiness hormones. In other words, gratitude is not just about feeling good. It is literally reprogramming your brain to function better. But there is one crucial detail. It cannot be generic gratitude. It has to be specific. Musashi developed a ritual. Every day before going to bed, he would write down 3 specific things he was grateful for that day. Not "I'm grateful for life," but "I'm grateful because today I was able to learn a new sword technique." Not "I'm grateful for my health," but "I'm grateful that my body lasted 6 hours of training without letting me down." Specificity forces your brain to really pay attention to what's working in your life, instead of going on autopilot and focusing only on what's broken. And it has an interesting side effect. When you train yourself to see what works, your ability to create more things that work increases. It's like training a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. But here's the most counterintuitive part. Musashi used gratitude not just to feel better, but as a war strategy. In battle, warriors who focused on what they could lose fought with fear. Warriors who focused on what they had to gain fought with courage. But Musashi focused on what he had already achieved. This made him calm, confident, unperturbed. He entered each duel grateful to be alive, grateful for the opportunity to test his skills, grateful to have made it this far. This was not naivety, it was applied psychology, because gratitude generates mental abundance, and mental abundance generates better decisions. When you believe you have resources, you act as if you have resources. When you act as if you have resources, you create resources. It's a virtuous cycle. Now think about the opposite. Envy creates mental scarcity. Mental scarcity creates desperate decisions. Desperate decisions create more scarcity. It's a vicious cycle. So answer me honestly, do you spend more time focused on what you have or what you lack? Because that answer defines whether you are building or destroying your own life. And here's the final irony. The people who practice gratitude the most are the ones who achieve the most new things. Not because the universe conspires in their favor or any esoteric nonsense, but because a grateful brain is a brain that functions better. It makes better decisions. It sees opportunities that others don't. It attracts people who want to be around it. Gratitude is not passivity. It is a competitive advantage. Musashi's sixth hidden rule is this: he never tried to go back to who he was before. That's right. While everyone who goes through a crisis becomes obsessed with recovering the life they had, Musashi understood that this life had already died, and trying to resurrect a dead person is a waste of time. Instead, he asked himself, what kind of person can I become with the knowledge I now have? He did not try to be the naive 17-year-old samurai again. He decided to become something he had never been before. A warrior philosopher, a master who combined physical strength with spiritual wisdom. He used pain as raw material to build a completely new version of himself. And here's the final twist. If the Battle of Sekigahara hadn't happened, Musashi would probably have lived and died as just another ordinary samurai, competent perhaps, but forgettable. It was the complete destruction of his life that created the conditions for him to become legendary. The crisis was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of the legend. And this applies to your life too. Maybe you're crying for the person you used to be. Maybe you're desperate to get back to that normal life you once had. But what if this normal life was actually a gilded prison? What if you were living far below your true potential? What if the crisis you are experiencing right now was the universe forcing you to evolve into a version of yourself that you didn't even know was possible? Just think. How many people do you know who are living normal lives but are completely unhappy? Who have everything they could possibly want but feel a constant emptiness inside? Maybe the broken life is actually life awakening. Because here's the truth no one wants to hear. Real growth only happens under pressure. Diamonds are formed under extreme pressure. Muscles grow when they're pushed beyond their limits. Character is forged in adversity. When life is easy, you get lazy. When life is hard, you develop superpowers you didn't even know you had. Musashi figured this out. He used the worst experience of his life as fuel to become the best version of himself. And these 5 rules: accept reality, reject shortcuts, control emotions, broaden perspective, cultivate gratitude, are the map he left for you to make the same journey. It's not easy, it's not fast, it's not comfortable, but it works. And here is my final challenge to you. Stop trying to fix your broken life. Start building a new one. Use Musashi's 5 rules not to go back to who you were, but to become who you can still be. Because at the end of the day, you have 2 choices. You can spend the rest of your life mourning the one you lost, or you can spend the rest of your life building who you can become. The choice is yours. But if you choose the second option, know that you are not alone. Musashi left a path marked. Modern science has confirmed that it works, and thousands of people have already walked this journey before you. Your broken life is not a curse. It's an opportunity in disguise. The question is, do you have enough courage to accept this opportunity? Because on the other side of that courage is waiting for the version of you that has not yet been born, but that really wants to be born. And this version, man, this version will surprise you. Now tell me, of Musashi's 5 rules, which one had the biggest impact on you? And most importantly, which one will you start applying today? Because knowledge without action is just entertainment. And you didn't come this far to be entertained. You came here to be transformed. So, what's it going to be?